All right, so we go on to number 16. So number 16 says, what type of test will be appropriate for this sample to see if the sample results are different from the average blood pressure measurement? All right, so this one is kind of important that we distinguish the null and alternate hypothesis. So is it different from the average blood pressure? So first let's figure out what the average blood pressure is. So the total is 125 with a standard deviation of 5. It is known that the blood pressure is not normally distributed. A sample of 25 adult blood pressure measurement are taken from the population. So in this one, we know the null hypothesis is that mu is equal to 125. The alternative is that mu is not equal to 125. Alright, so for this one, we just want to figure out which one can it be. So we're trying to see which test can we apply that will give us the correct answer. So if you remember, we can actually use the confidence interval to kind of validate our hypothesis testing if only the alternate hypothesis is different or not equal to. So if you look at this one, it says not equal to, so that means we could actually use a confidence interval to validate our answer. So that way 3 is one of the answer. And for this one, it will be a t-statistic because we don't know the actual standard deviation. We only know it for the sample. So that way 1 and 2 will be, 1 and 3. So our final answer should yet be C. And that's it for 16. Alright, so let's move on to 17. So 17 is doing the interpretation of a confidence interval. So if we look at our problem, so say use the following information. So say many couples believe that it's getting too expensive to have an average wedding in the United States. According to the website costofwedding.com, the average cost of a wedding in the U.S. in 2009 was $24,066. Recently, in a random sample of 40 weddings in the U.S., it was found that the average cost of a wedding was $23,224 with a standard deviation of $2,903. On the basis of this, a 95% confidence interval for the mean cost of wedding in the U.S. is $22,296 to $24,152. So saying choose a statement that is best interpretation of the confidence interval. So we have a confidence interval. So the confidence interval is 22,296 to 24,152. So remember, when we're doing a confidence interval, the 95 or whatever confidence level it is, always represent how confident we are on the method that we're using. It had nothing to do with the probability. So it's not like if we do 100 wedding, 95 of the wedding will fall in between 22,000 and 24,000. It just means that if we were to repeat the confidence interval many times, 95% of the time it will capture the true mean, and 5% of the time it won't capture the true mean. So for those reasons, A will not be the correct answer, because A is saying the probability that a U.S. wedding will cost more than 24,000 is less than 3%. Remember, when you're talking about confidence interval, this is talking about probability. So if you look at B, it said in about 95% of all sample of 40 U.S. wedding, the resulting confidence interval will contain the mean cost of all wedding in the U.S. So that one is pretty accurate. I would have liked it mention the confidence interval saying that the wedding is between 22,296 to 24,152. But B is doing a okay job on it. If you look at C, she's saying we are extremely confident. So that's kind of where we hit a mark because it's saying we are extremely confident, but we don't know what extremely confident means. Because extremely confident could be that is 100%, or it could be 99%. So that's a kind of vague. So if they would have put, instead of extremely confident, if they would have put 95%, C would have been the correct answer. But since they didn't put 95%, the closest interpretation to that will be B. But ideally, C will be the correct answer. As long as they're saying extremely confident, they put 95%. Alright, so that's it for 17. So let's do 18. So it says use the following information to answer the question. According to the website costwedding.com, the average cost of a flower for a wedding is $698. Recently, in a random sample of 40 weddings in the U.S., it was found that the average cost of the flower was $734, with a standard deviation of 102. On the basis of this, a 95% confidence interval for the mean cost of a flower for the wedding is as follow: 701 to 767. So if we look at the problem, what it's asking is asking, does the confidence interval provide evidence that the mean cost of flower for a wedding has increased? So what we want to do, we want to get this value right here, the 698, and we want to see does it fit into our confidence interval. Because if it does fall inside our confidence interval, that means that it has not increased. But if the 698 is lower than whatever we have for our confidence interval, then we know it has increased. So if we look at 698 is actually lower. 698 is actually lower than the lowest number here. So 701 and 767 is bigger than 698. So since both of these confidence, pretty much the lower and the upper bound are bigger than 698, we'll put yes that it has increased. Alright, so we'll stop right there and we'll continue on with number 19 in the next video.